Hi, Cancer. This is Tisch Aitken, and this is your astrological forecast for the month of July. And it is also your birthday season because we just had the summer solstice. I'm recording some of these horoscopes prior to the month of July. So happy birthday season. And it is a big one for you because we're still in the eclipse season. And you've been through a lot the last few years with all these planets pardon me, all these planets transiting opposite your sign with all of this configuration in Capricorn, particularly this year with Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto all bringing a mass transformation and renovation in your area of relationships and restructuring in that sector. And from November of 2018 until May 5th of this year, the nodes of fate were in your sign of Cancer. That's where the transiting north node of the moon was transiting in your first house of self, which, was invoking a lot of new beginnings and change, but also chaos. It can be difficult. There can be a lot of growing pains in that process. And then the south node eclipses were occurring in your area of partnerships. So there's a lot of death and renovations around your area of partnerships. And that's still going to be a theme for the remainder of the year, but it's really figuring out whom you can trust and whom you can't. And that's what Saturn has been showing you really since the whole Saturn transit began on December 20th of 2017, when Saturn, which is the cosmic taskmaster and it's the reality planet, it really shows us what's working in our lives and what we can commit to further and what really is not working and what we need to restructure, or almost like a Pluto transit, what we need to either end or just, it's not an area of maturation. And that's what Saturn wants us to do. It wants us to mature and take more responsibility and accountability in that area. So partnerships have been a big theme. And Pluto, which is also one of the key players of the year, has been transiting on and off in your sector of relationships since 2008. It was on and off. It entered the world axis, the world point, when Pluto entered 0 degrees of Capricorn. And that would have brought a lot of change and transformation. And it's been transiting in that house and will be for a while longer. But that's a key player because Saturn and Pluto, which really is like having a mass Saturn transit for the world and a mass Pluto transit, death, rebirth, collapsing of old structures, renovation, repair, restructuring, committing and anchoring your goals like never before, because there's been so much cardinal energy this year. We had a mutable season in the Gemini season. In June, we had a lot of planets in mutable points, but now we're back to having a lot of cardinal. And, this is, again, the cardinal signs are what help us to catalyze change. And the cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And, in all of this, Capricorn is also dealing with karma and mass karma in many different areas. And again, prior to even this whole world situation with all of that's going on and around the economy, around the pandemic, around other areas of injustice or challenges that are going on. And it's a very painful and difficult year. There's been a lot of loss of life, but also loss of dreams. There's also been reinvention and people that are coming together and coming in good ways. And there are people that are pivoting temporarily and some that are pivoting permanently. And that's Capricorn will bring, and it will denote permanent change, particularly when Saturn and Pluto meet up at the global point. And that also is 22 degrees of the cardinal signs. And so it's something to recognize that in your own life, there's collapsing of old structures in some relationships, and there's also further commitment in that sector. And Saturn briefly entered your eighth house of joint resources and finances and debt and mortgages, and it's the house of investments, it's the house of intimacy and emotional blocks. And Saturn is going to re-enter your house of relationships on July 2nd. And so that's, again, where you're still restructuring. But it gave you a glimpse whether you're having to work more with your financial stability and fixing up some debt, or you're investing further in your future financially. But Saturn transiting the eighth house is not the easiest, so you do want to kind of do your homework. And you did get a glimpse of it because it was transiting in that sector of your chart in Aquarius from March 23rd, and it'll be there until July 2nd. And then it re-enters Aquarius on December 17th, and it'll be there until March of 2023. So, again, a lot of focus on partnerships and a lot of focus on self. We've had, we're in eclipse season. We already had 2 eclipses occur in the month of June. So we started it with a partial lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, which for you falls in your 6th house of work and daily routine. And that's just about, daily habits. And then we had the total solar eclipse that was very relevant to you in the sign of Cancer in your 1st house of self and new beginnings. And this was a really powerful eclipse because it was at the world point, because it happened less than 8 hours after the summer solstice began, which is when the sun enters 0 degrees of your sign of Cancer. And, it begins it's the longest day in the northern hemisphere and marks the beginning of summer. And then that total solar eclipse was at the world axis, but also only within a degree of the north node of destiny. Even though the north node is now in Gemini and it's no longer in your sun sign, it exited that nodal axis on May 5th. It's still really, really pronounced when it's so closely conjunct. I mean, you have to have the nodes of the moon within 9 degrees of an eclipse to denote a total solar or lunar eclipse. In this case, it was 1 degree. That's huge on the world axis. So we can expect a lot of movement and change. And for you, it's falling in your house of self. And what's pretty amazing is you're going to have 2 new moons this summer. So you've been going through a lot of change because all of these planets in Capricorn, especially this year, Jupiter, well, Pluto's been opposing your sun sign. Saturn has been the last couple of years. And now Jupiter, although it's in its fall position and it's transiting and expanding that narrative of restructuring around relationships, it's been opposing your sign. So that can be oppositions and is oppositions. It's a 180-degree angle. But the point is 180 degrees. But the thing is, a lot of planets retrograde, several. The only planets that aren't retrograde are Mars and Uranus, so bear with me on this. But so it's 180 degrees and it is an opposition. So again, emphasizing I versus thou, emphasizing the relationship part of this whole Capricorn narrative for you, but also partnering with yourself in a new way. And, with the total solar eclipse, really initiating new beginnings. And that energy looms for a while after with such a strong eclipse, and that is in your 1st house of self. And then there'll be a 2nd new moon in your house of new beginnings, in the house of physical body, just in beginning a lot of things, projects that you want to start. And that will occur on June 20th at 28 degrees of Cancer. So again, the moon is in the sign it rules because the moon rules your sign of Cancer. So that's a big deal. And then we have a 3rd and final eclipse, a lunar eclipse, a partial one. It's at 13 degrees of Capricorn, and that falls in your house of relationships. Again, that sector of your chart is being transformed. A lot of endings, there are changes, a lot of karma around this. The nodes of fate are no longer in Capricorn, Cancer, but again, a lot of restructuring and a lot of planetary reflection in that sector for you because, again, until the fall, you've got transiting Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto retrograde in your house of relationships as of July 2nd. And you have the final eclipse in that house for you and in that sector, and this total solar eclipse in Cancer. That was the final eclipse in Cancer on June 21st or June 20th, depending on where, or June 22nd, rather, depending on where you are. But June 20th, okay. But regardless, that solstice eclipse was a really, really big one. And And this is a cardinal summer. We have a cardinal year. It's about really committing to what you want to initiate and begin, and also knowing that another big deal is that Mars is entering Aries on June 27th, and it is going to be in Aries until 3rd of 2021. And that's also about what you're trying to, what new beginnings you're trying to initiate, what you're trying to start in your life, and it's excellent in the sign of Aries, but it's also let's say it can be very fiery and impulsive, and it can be definitely challenging, and so I think that knowing that this is for you also about reviewing your career choices and your life goals. And that's where Mars will be transiting until, the beginning of next year, that this is an excellent time this summer, although a short window, to initiate new beginnings professionally and to take action, because Mars in a cardinal fire sign really likes to plunge forward and full steam ahead. But it also is going to be clashing with Capricorn and with this lineup, and that it doesn't like clashing with the planet of restrictions and limitations, which Capricorn represents among other things. But it's good for structuring our goals. It's a lot of cardinal energy to get things accomplished, and Mars will be retrograde from September 9th until November 13th in that house, in that area of your life. So professionally, so you really want to assess what you want to get accomplished. And even though a lot of the other outer planets will be direct in the fall, slowly but surely starting in September and October, it's still Mars retrograde is a personal planet. And so that to me is a much bigger deal. You don't want to initiate, and a new beginning altogether with Mars retrograde professionally. You don't want to become incorporated. There are things you can return to professionally and projects you started, but it's not a good time to commence something altogether. And the other thing too is that it's going to be, again, clashing with Capricorn energy, and that's not easy, and it's going to set off that Saturn-Pluto conjunction 3 times. So these are dates you want to remember. August 11th, that gets to 22 degrees cardinal. Mars gets to 22 degrees of Aries, and building up to that, we often feel Mars cycles before they actually become exact. October 7th, when Mars is retrograde, setting it off again. December 19th, close to the winter solstice. So again, around that time, we'll get more of the story and more information in our own lives about how we've all been working with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that changed the world and began the year and the decade, with all this energy of incredible Capricorn restructuring in our lives. And then Pluto, when it stations direct on October 4th, is going to station at 22 degrees of Capricorn, therefore re-triggering that point as well. So a lot is for our transformation and empowerment, but it's not all easy, and it doesn't come all in an easy manner. But Saturn cycles, and it's like the world is having a mass Saturn transit and a mass Pluto transit. It doesn't come easily, but can really empower you. It can transform you. It can make you bigger in your career and your life goals than you ever wanted to be or ever thought you could be. And it also can help you to help others. And that's the other idea of Saturn in Aquarius and Jupiter entering Aquarius. And that's, going to be in on the winter solstice on December 21st. They meet up, and that marks a new 20-year cycle, and that's a big deal. So I think that's going to be a lot around enlightenment and dealing with community and groups and organizations and working collectively and dealing much more with the mind and cerebral, techniques more than just the physical and status oriented. And that's, again, I think a transformation. Not that we're not going to like nice things, but there's much more of an emphasis on education in many ways, with the nodes of fate transiting in Gemini and Sagittarius, and with the Saturn-Jupiter transit beginning Saturn's transit through Aquarius. And last but not least, Venus it was retrograde from May 13th until June 25th in the sign of Gemini. And that is your 12th house of the house of dreams and subconscious, and that can bring a lot of really creative endeavors that can bring old distant memories of loved ones or people from the distant past that resurface. And Mercury, we start the month of July with Mercury retrograding in your sun sign. So it's retrograding in your first house, again, bringing a lot of reassessment as you're also initiating new beginnings, also bringing up old memories of childhood and primary years. But a lot around, I think, communication and people from the past resurfacing in many different ways. And Venus was out of bounds from April 2nd until it will be out of bounds until July 1st, and so the beginning of the month. And that means it exceeds the sun's outer limit by declination and is just really, really augmented and charged up. So that really also, I think, emphasizes the Venusian qualities. So it's a lot to work with. And we also have a Jupiter-Neptune sextile on July 27th, pardon me. That is going to be very good for manifesting and healing work. And Jupiter is transiting in your house of partnerships and relationships, helping you to tap into the dream with that, with Neptune and Pisces. And so that'll be helpful as well. And I think that that's where you want to go with a lot of manifesting and meditation with all this energy. And the second new moon in your sign, no more eclipses in your first house, and pretty soon Saturn and Jupiter will leave the opposite sign of Capricorn at the end of the year, so you're almost done with that too. So that's something to look forward to, and just work well and hard with all this cardinal energy and figure out what you really want to anchor this year and what is of meaning to you. All right, thanks and take care. Bye-bye.